about 30 years ago, they created this thing called carbon credits or carbon offsets. And it's similar to a stock, but what it does, it allows companies or individuals to offset their pollution emissions when they've done everything they could do. And it's usually projects in underserved communities that either one, absorb carbon, such as planting a tree or protecting a forest, or two, reducing emissions, like using renewable energy, such as hydro or solar power. Well, last year in 2023, I read this, or one of my friends read sent an article to me, and it said, hey, 90% of all the forest related carbon credits were worthless. And I'm like, what? I thought these carbon credits were real. I met with the chief. I gave him the article and I said, sir, this project's been going on 12 years in your community. What have you gotten? He's like, what are you talking about? I go, well, these carbon credits, you're supposed to get $30 million. Now he goes, are you kidding me? Like this, if I had $30 million US dollars? And I said, yes, sir. He goes, this place would look like New York City. He goes, we don't have food. We don't have water. We don't have internet. We don't have employment. We don't have education. This place would be turned around. He goes, where did this money go? I go, well, what did you get? He goes, I got a bag of seed and a bag of soil. And once in a while they come around and do a little seminar. I'm really sorry. I said, you know what? I'll speak up. And that led to the TEDx. So I said, where are there real good carbon credit projects? And I talked to this climatologist who has now passed, but he told me, Jay, it's super easy. If you plant something, you let it grow, and then you bury it. That's the easiest form of carbon credits. So I went and found biochar, right? It's charcoal's eco-friendly cousin, but it's basically a bunch of tree or crop waste condensed down into this charcoal in, if you will, a trailer, like a 20-foot container. And if you mix that biochar with manure, and then it goes back into the ground, and it lasts literally for centuries. And it enriches the soil. Again, 60% of the population are farmers. What do they have? They have crop waste, a lot of it. And so then we looked at which country has the most concentrated, and we ended up in Malawi because they have the most. They grow 62% of their land is maize.
Welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast with Zac Palmer, the show where we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to grow your business, strengthen your relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Jaye Connolly. Among other prestigious roles, Jaye is the chairman and CEO of RippleNami, chairman of Callium Resources, and author of Carbon Credits or Crap. As an executive and strategic leader with broad experience in technology, climate, healthcare services, and oil, gas, and mining manufacturing organizations from the startup to corporate level, Jaye has served in key executive roles leading to acquisitions totaling more than $2 billion in revenue over her 25-year career. With a passion for the global climate economy and aiding in the development of underserved regions like Africa, join us today as we dive into the intersection of data aggregation and tax systems to unlock economic potential in underdeveloped regions. Let's dive in and take another step on your journey to perpetual growth. Jaye, welcome. I'm super excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Now, Jaye, you have a very dynamic background. And I find it altogether intriguing on so many different levels because, I feel like personally, climate change is one of these things that is not being discussed enough. It feels like it's being swept under the rug. I mean, to me, if you just break it down to the basic fundamentals of human awareness, it's like we can all agree things are warming up. Regardless of what the cause or circumstance is, if we don't do something about it, we're heading the wrong direction. Now, what I would love to lead in with is, if you would just give our audience, our listeners, a little bit about your story, history, your background. Where did you start in business, or maybe it was even in earlier in your education, and how did it lead to where you are today, the successes and contributions that you are making to the global economy?
Sure. So very simple. I have an accounting background. And when I was young, I said, if you know the numbers, you can rule the world. So
So
it
true.
all started with accounting. And I'm from Dallas, Texas originally. And I wanted to be in oil. I wanted to be JR and Bobby in the oil business from Dallas, the show. And so I did. I went in and was started at Pennzoil right out of the gate in Houston. And it was back in the early 80s when the barrel of oil went to $12 a barrel and everyone got laid off and I was the cheapest person in the office, so they just kept giving me stuff to do. So I forced gumped my way to where I am now, and it all started with accounting and then finance and then grew to M&A. Mergers and acquisition was a great experience because not only I did the deals, but I also lived with the deal to make sure it was operational and it met the synergies that we projected.
Mm.
Did that for 25 years in healthcare. I rolled up every type of sector, healthcare you can imagine. LabCorp was one of the biggest ones. Um, and then from there, I went into the C level because I went into AI, and it was an AI healthcare company. And because I had healthcare experience and I had the specific sector of what they radiology experience, they said, "Hey, why don't you come be the CFO and why don't you replace the CEO?" So then I became a turnaround CEO. So it's been a journey through my turnaround experience. I've done four of them. The people call me, they go, "Hey, we got another one." And you retire after each turnaround that you do and you successfully sell it. And it's exhausting. It is exhausting. And so I always retire and then they call me back. So this one was a callback of in Africa. And it was a couple guys that started it and they didn't really have the background. And my team has been with me for about four companies. So I called the team and I said, "Hey, you guys want to do something in Africa?" They're like, "Hey, why not?" So 10 years later, we're still doing it. And we're taking big data, aggregation of government's data, and using AI, using blockchain, using data visualization, the whole bit to feed it back to the government in a way that solves big problems.
Mm.
That's the
Wow.
journey. Forrest
Wow.
Gump. Forrest Gump.
No kidding. I
Nope.
mean, there's so much there. I mean,
Yeah.
from
So,
oil to
mm-hmm,
healthcare, and it sounded like I don't
mm-hmm,
know if it was the whole time, but that ended up in
mm-hmm.
specialization in radiology,
Yeah, it was
and
just one
then
sector I rolled up.
yeah, and
Yeah.
mergers and acquisitions to
Mm-hmm,
turnaround expert. I
mm-hmm,
mean, that is one heck of a professional journey. I mean, what's so interesting about this too, I mean, it's one thing to have a background in accounting and finance, but that doesn't necessarily, and actually more often than not, does not equate to what really makes a great leader. So,
mm-hmm,
what I'm really curious about is what your leadership journey looked like. And ultimately, I really want to dive deep into the work you're doing in Africa and
mm-hmm,
the convergence point between big data and AI and how we can leverage this to, well, we'll talk about more about your book on carbon credits and stuff too.
mm-hmm.
But to talk to us a little bit more about that journey in leadership, where did this start? What was your life like growing up? I mean, was this a byproduct of great parents and mentorship? Was it the exact opposite where you're running away from something that you didn't want to model? Like, what did it look like for you?
Yeah, so my parents, I had great parents. I still do. They're still alive, and
Oh, wow.
I'm proud of them. So I had great parents, and I was an athlete. So the drive comes from sports, and
Mm-hmm.
I come from a very long line of athletes. So it was always we were very competitive,
Hmm.
but my parents always said, "Did you do your best, whether you failed or not? Like, did you try your hardest?" That was it. And if you said yes, they were good with it. So they encouraged us. We never had the "you can't do this, you're a woman." That was never ever a discussion. It's like, that's what you want to do, go do it. We just want you to go to college. Because my dad was my first one that went to college when he was an adult. So it wasn't, this great educated family, but it was a loving family and an encouraging family, and they just wanted the best for us. So great family, and the sports instilled competitiveness, teamwork, and leadership.
That is fascinating on two levels. One, I literally emailed myself that exact question not too long ago because I'm like, wow, there is so much power in this
Mhm,
one simple question from a leadership standpoint, whether it's leading your
mhm,
family or leading your team. Just by asking, did you give? Did you put in your full and best effort as
mhm.
it pertains to whatever outcome you were trying to achieve? If the answer is yes, I applaud you all the way. If the answer was no, what do we need to do to step up and improve?
Right.
And I
Right.
love that. There's so much
Yeah.
power in that one question. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the other piece too was, that question aside, now my brain is completely getting derailed from the other part that I was thinking about.
Yeah. What was
There's
the
so
other part of
much
your
gold
question?
here. Yeah. What
Yeah.
was the other part of my
Oh,
question? Oh, from a
leadership
parenting.
skills.
So, well,
Yeah.
yes, and actually from a parenting standpoint, like,
hmm
do you have kids currently?
I'm a single mom. I was a single mom for the
You
most of
are?
my
Yeah.
life. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I did the whole sports thing, and now she's a, litigation partner in a law firm.
Oh, amazing. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. What's so interesting? So I've got three kids. I have a 16-year-old, and she was a byproduct of the, global COVID transition. So, I mean, she
Oh,
hit
shoot.
middle
Yeah.
school
hmm
right when the world shut down. So
Wow.
the majority of her middle school career life, what have you, was like virtually non-existent. So unfortunately, the thing that I found that happened for her is she took that step back during one of those really pivotal periods of time. And
hmm
while she's built very athletically. She has a lot of innate athletic talent. She never continued to pursue it, and it's always ate away at me while my younger two have continued to, because of that exact reason. I mean, I think there is so
Yeah.
much value that we gain, whether you're an outstanding athlete or average or subpar, it doesn't matter. It's the lessons that we learn about cooperativeness and communication and resilience and perseverance, and that the desire and drive to do more, achieve more, impact more, grow.
Yeah.
Like I struggle with that all the time, feeling like there's some part of me that may be at fault, but I always take that step back and recognize that sometimes there are external circumstances that are outside of our control, so we just do something
Exactly.
different next. So I love that. Tell me a little bit about that, though, how that did help develop you from a leadership standpoint, and how do you
Mhm.
look at growth and development within organizations, particularly from a turnaround? Because I
Yeah.
have to imagine that there's going to be some toxicity in the cultures that you've
Mhm.
stepped into.
Yes. Yeah. So I learned, look, diversity is, it's just business. There's ups and downs. I don't take it personally. A lot of people take business personally. And I always say, look, it's just business. It's
Yeah.
not a personal attack on you. It just isn't working out.
hmm
So one of the things, because my career has been like, there's been a lot of things I've gone through in the companies that I was with.
hmm
When I was at Pennzoil, the largest punitive damages ever settled till this day, $12 billion settlement off a handshake deal between between Getty Oil and Pennzoil. We beat Texaco. So we got $12 billion in a punitive settlement, and we had to figure out what to do with it. And they put a team together, and it was super fun to figure out. I was in my 20s, right? Like, we have $12 billion. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
So a lot of diversity. I've gone through DOJ investigations. I've seen CFOs go to jail. I've seen a lot of good and bad things. And in deal land, I mean, when you're in mergers and acquisition, my God, things happen.
Yeah.
And what I did is I always said, who do I want to emulate? What are the good skill sets I want from the leaders that I have? And who do I not want to emulate? Like, who do I can't, like, that trait is bad and this trait is good. So I want to focus on what was good and learn from what people did that was bad, and never do that. And I never play in the gray area because I'm an accountant by trade. So everything's very black and white. There's no gray area to me. A lot of people like to play in the gray area. I don't. There's right,
Yeah.
wrong, good, bad, truth, false. So I'm very easy in my mind. That's how I think. So from a
Oh,
leadership perspective, I'm not a micromanager. I know how to do it. I don't want to do it. If I have to do it, I've got the wrong person in the position. And with my team, which we've been together for 4 companies, what I love about them, we all have strengths and weaknesses. We know which they are. There's no egos. And when you say, hey, can you do this? I know it's going to get done. And if they have a problem, they come and we sit there and solve it. Um, we work very well. So it's not like I'm the leader, you must do what I say. No, it's very collaborative. And you have to do that, especially now that we're in different cultures. In Africa, totally different culture shock for us, but we've learned to navigate through it. So you have to empower whoever you're working with and allow them to get their legs and be leaders, and not
yeah.
undercut them and check the ego at the door.
Yeah, I mean the old top-down authoritarian model, which is the environment I grew up in,
Same.
really does
Same.
not work. And I learned
Mhm.
that the hard way very quickly, taking over companies in 19. It was interesting. You're like, yeah,
Hmm.
this is not a great way to lead employees. So fantastic evolution. You're right. I mean, it's model the
Hmm.
best to elite the rest is the way I like to look at it, which
Right.
sometimes is tricky, especially when you're trying to
Yes.
break old patterns. So there has to be a great level of self-awareness and EQ. I mean, our own
Hmm.
emotional intelligence. What were some of the what are for you some of the
Hmm.
character traits, the values, the leading beliefs that you believe really make a great leader?
Honesty, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
When things aren't working out, let's talk about it. When what your intent is. Like I never hit in every deal we did, in every turnaround, I'd sit down with everybody and like, look, guys, this isn't working out, and this is why, and explaining why. And we have to change A, B, and C. Can you get on board? Yes or no? If you can't, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Move on. We'll move you on. Doing acquisitions, like we did so many acquisitions. And so when you take over a company, there's all these employees. And before we took over a company or acquired a company, we knew every single employee, what they did, and what was they're going to, either they were going to be a keeper, we put a K by their name, they were going to be a synergy, they were going to be let go, or they're going to be a T, a transition person that we needed them for X amount. And we gave them what we needed, the tasks they needed to get done, and the bonuses they would get. And just like American Idol, we would put people in three different rooms and we'd say, hey, you're here because you're going to be part of the company going forward. Day one. And the next room, we were like, hey, sorry, end of the road. Here's your package. Thank you. Thank you. And then the third group is like, you're going to stay for a year or 6 months, whatever it was. And these are what you need to do. And it took that unknown out of the equation when you get acquired in a mergers or an acquisition, because it's like a kid in divorce. Like, what about me? Everybody just sits there and talks. And when there's a void of communication, there's a lack of work and just a lot of angst. So let's just take it out of the room. Let's take the air out of the room.
Yeah, not only avoid of work and angst. I mean, what ends up happening is those just insidious communications where people start
Sure.
to tell stories. I mean, frankly, when you don't know, you're going to fill in that void with something, and our minds are very good at usually coming up with the worst case scenario. So I love what you're talking about there from the standpoint of
Hmm.
honesty and transparency, because you're right. If we aren't openly and frequently communicating and leading our teams in that light, then we're doing them a disservice, because of the fact that in all probability they're going to start creating a disempowering narrative, which is going to show up in their work and relationships and other
Yep.
aspects of life. So that's fascinating, um, and really really powerful too. Talk a little bit about the developmental transitions, because I mean there's a different mindset that has to go into a merger and acquisition versus some of the things that you're doing today
Hmm.
and financial backgrounds. And one thing I got to say too is I love your viewpoint on it's just business. I
Hmm.
think that single phrase can be taken for better or for worse in many instances, but it is very true and very powerful. And what I'm hearing from you is it's about removing the emotion behind the
Yes.
decisions and looking at things from a fundamental basic standpoint of logic. Is this right? Is this wrong? Are we in the
Hmm.
green? Are we in the black? Are we in the red? Like
Right.
it's very straightforward and simple, but that is one of the most challenging things to do as humans, because our nature is to lean into emotion and then try and justify it with logic. So, was that something
Hmm.
that you feel, came as an innate part of who you are? Was that a strength that you had to develop over time to be able to trust that paradigm? Where does that come from?
Yeah, interesting. So I grew up, I was the oldest of three children, and I was the quietest. And I was the experiment, as I said, my parents. And then by my time my brother and sister came along, things became lax and lax. And I would just still be quiet and I would observe and listen. And I don't get overly emotional. I can, but that's not my trait. I'm calm in a storm, and I am observer, and I'm a problem solver. And I've always been a problem solver. So I just see everything as a puzzle. Like, how can I fix this? And I always, as a single mom, you learn to triage very quickly. And you always have a plan A, B, C, or D. If A doesn't work, then you got B. Then you go to C, maybe you got to go to D. So it's about thinking on multiple levels to say, okay, if this isn't going to work, how about this? And I clear my head by either running or just some exercise that totally level sets my mind, and I can problem solve like no one's business. That is my superhuman power.
Mhm.
And then seeing the future, because I know from M&A what buy, how to sell companies, and I know what the end game needs to be, and how do I get there? And that's to me the puzzle and the problem that I like to figure out. And how do I add shareholder value the whole way through? I always keep the shareholder in mind. We all treat that money as if it's our own, and every single dime we angst over it. We do not splurge at whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, which is again wise.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah, I
countless
had a
stories of laughter.
CEO. Here's a funny story. This CEO was bragging to me. He's like, I raised $60 million, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I raised three and we were profitable. You still are out there raising money 10 years later and you're not. I'm sorry, your model's not working. You have a
Mhm.
flawed business model. But that's his brag rights where I've raised this money. And some people look at that and say, oh, well, they're a good fundraiser. I would rather have a good, sort
Executor.
of my, yeah, I would
Yeah.
have sort of my funds.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
You
there's a
probably had a
lot
great
of,
house and boat and car and all the things though,
oh, the nice
right?
car, have probably got a plane. I said, when they get the plane, that's when you got to get out of the company. Short the
That-
stock.
yeah, no kidding. No kidding. That's really, really fascinating. Um,
Mm.
hmm. Talk to us a little bit more about the work that you're doing today, because this is something that I'm really excited
Oh.
to peel back the onion on. I mean, and actually, just before we dive into it, I mean, as
Mhm.
kind of a transitional conversation, you mentioned about the um, the difference of doing business internationally. We
Mhm.
have, when you're working with a different culture, there are different thoughts, beliefs, values, expectations, everything. And I imagine that it's a lot like, a combination of learning a new language,
Mhm.
learning a new religion. I mean, a
Sometimes
lot of it.
literally.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
Yeah.
So talk about what that journey and experience has been like, because it's one thing to do business in the United States. It's a whole nother to be outside of our little myopic swashum land that we are sitting on presently.
Yeah, sure. So it started 10 years ago. We just had our 10-year anniversary. And the whole thesis of this company was, look, there is a propensity of big data. And with the proliferation of cell phones, more and more and more data's getting generated, but there's not really structured data. And then what do you do with this data? And I think we use like 1% of the data that we all generate. So the two guys that started this company, it's like, what if we could pull this disparate data in and solve for problems? And you think of like a Google Maps. So when I pull in Google Maps, I say, I want to go to point A to point B. And maybe along the way, I want to stop at a Starbucks. So that is about the limit I can do on a map. But what if I wanted to say, show me all the power lines, show me all the roads, where's the traffic? Also, a hotel. So I want to have different layers of data in there. Could we do that? So that was the thesis. And the answer was, yeah, we can. So we built this data visualization system. And originally it was for emergency management. And when an emergency happens, it's a very command and control environment, meaning that there's a command center and they report out to everyone else in the field. So if you're a fireman, you call in, hey, the fire jumped the highway here, rather than could you take a picture, put it on a map so then everyone could see it real time. They quickly pivoted before me because there was no money in emergency management. um, so they said, okay, well, Africa has a lot of data. And one of the guys said, well, I got a lot of contacts in Africa. So we struggled for the first 5 years because they didn't really have the context they thought, and they didn't have they weren't at the right level. They were talking to ministers rather than presidents. And it wasn't until, and I was a board advisor in the beginning and then became the CEO. And it wasn't until I got the right partners in country. And what's important in Africa, there's 54 countries, there's 1.5 billion people, and the majority are subsistence farmers, like 60% of the population. By 2030, Africa will have the largest workforce in the world. 50% of their population right now, the 1.5 billion, are under 16 years old. So to me, lots of opportunity, and everybody has a cell phone. So when we looked at Africa, we said, what is it? Where do they invest their money? Where's the big pain point? And the big pain point is, look, all the African countries, they're strapped with debt, a lot of debt. None of them are sovereign. They've been independent about 60 some odd years from the colony days. And they're rich in natural resources, both trees, mineral, every rare earth mineral comes from there. To put it in perspective, one country, the Democratic Republic of Congo, sits on $27 trillion of unmined minerals.
Wow.
You sink that in. Unmined. And it is the third poorest country in the world.
Wow.
Why?
Yeah.
So we saw a lot of opportunity. And the other thing we liked about Africa is, look, they don't have legacy ICT systems. So they didn't need to, it wouldn't take an act of God to say, hey, can we take your data and try to solve for a problem? So we got great partners in country. It's usually, some of the richest guys in town that really want to make a difference in their country, that have a relationship with the whatever administration's there. We walk in together to the president's office, and it's a triangle. That's our triangle that we walk in. We have a tech company. We can solve for everything. And we started when we looked at what Africa does, they invest in properties, cash. They invest in livestock and agriculture. Those are the big three investments that if you look across all 54 countries, that's kind of the common theme. They don't have 401ks. They don't, the 30% mortgage rates. You're not going to pay, take out a mortgage. And we looked at, okay, well, properties, like what kind of, and this one country came and said, hey, can you do anything related to increasing the revenue collections from property related taxation? I said, gosh, we're not taxation people, but it's a data problem. And we looked across, we looked at the country, and we said, well, you got about 12 different ministries that have a little something about the data that have something to do with property. And at the end of the day, as simple as I can put it, we built like a Zillow for property taxation. It was a history. It was a secret who owned what property, and it was a maze. And sometimes it was a business that owned it because businesses had less taxes. Sometimes it was a family member. But we put this whole maze together. So we consolidated all the government's data, and we built a system that showed who owns what property. Is it being rented or not? What is the water usage, the electricity usage, the septic tank, everything. Like everything you would know about a property, we consolidated. And then we could feed it back to the government and saying, oh, by the way, you're collecting 2% of what you should be collecting. And here's where the low hanging fruit is. And, go to town. So we started that, the taxation side in Uganda. And we're now, we work mainly in sub-Saharan Africa, which is the middle part of Africa. We don't work in South Africa. We don't work in North Africa. And we started in Uganda on taxation. In Kenya, we do livestock traceability, meaning that we're trying to solve for a bank wanted to do micro lending for pastoral farmers. Okay. And he said, but we don't know what cattle they own, and we don't know how to get them micro lending. So we put a whole ecosystem about a pastoral farmer and cattle. We linked them together. Veterinarians, we linked in the healthcare records all the way through to end of sale, so that they could show I had 10 cows at $100. So I can get micro lending up to this. So we did a whole digital wallet for them. We did all the food supply traceability during COVID because the NGOs couldn't get out there. So we built applications for that. So to us, person, place, or thing, it doesn't matter. It's big data. We pull it all in. We match it because none of it ever matches between databases. And then we use AI to analyze it. We use data visualization to see it. And then we solve whatever the problem. So our back end of the system, from the data matching to the end result, never changes. It's just the front end on what the inputs are. So person, place, or thing, we don't care. We're a data aggregator. And we now are just starting in climate, because if they one country sits on $27 trillion of unmined minerals, they also have ancient forests on top of those minerals. So Africa has the second largest forest in the world, called the Congo Basin. And it's across sub-Saharan Africa, second to the Amazon. And it is being clear cutted like you've never seen, for charcoal making, for mining, and for subsistence living. So makes a lot of oxygen production there. So we came and we saw, and this is where my book comes in, and I did a TEDx on this called "Carbon Credits Are Crap," and I can get into that if you want, but just I'll stop there. So we're in climate, agriculture, livestock, and taxation is what we focus on throughout Africa.
Wow, thank you for sharing all that. I mean, there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah,
Where I initially got stuck, and I want to go way back,
sure, sure.
is 1%.
Yep.
We're only using 1% of all of the
Hmm.
data that's currently available today. Now, is that a byproduct of the present technologies that we have not being able to keep up with utilization?
Hmm.
Is it a more byproduct of just we have all those data sitting here and we don't know what questions to ask, and we're trying to determine how, like you talk about the idea of um, taking back, but then layering the data relative to what specific outcome you're trying to create, and then you can aggregate and position and, in
Yep.
essence, try and create a story, right?
Yep.
So going back to that 1% is
Hmm.
what is the reason for that? That it's so little is
Yep.
being utilized.
Data silos. They're
Hmm.
all sitting in a different silo. Think of your phone. How many apps you have on that? Do any of them talk to each other? No.
Oh,
It's a
wow.
data
Interesting.
silo. Yeah. So there's actually a company out there trying to pull that together, which here in the States, which I just came across, but it's just data silos. So everybody's got their data fiefdom, if you will. It's like, this is my kingdom, this is my data. None of it's interactive.
Interesting.
So it's the first part for us. It was the first part for e-government. And there's only
Hmm.
a couple countries in the world that have e-government, meaning that all their data reside in one place.
Huh. Wow, that's amazing.
Estonia is one of them.
Really?
And they
Huh.
did it, they built it all on a blockchain. And they did it because Russia kept trying to hack in, and their entire government uses one database. Now it's parsed out based upon what you need,
Right.
but all your government services, everything's done electronically. So it's
That's
the start of
brilliant.
e-government. And what's Africa, what we're seeing now, because we've demonstrated you can be more efficient,
I
you
was
can
just
be
that was
transparent.
the word that was stuck in my head was efficiency. Yeah, exactly.
Efficiency. Talk
Yeah.
about traceability and transparency. I
Yeah.
mean, we suffer that from that here. None of
Oh,
our
yeah.
none of our departments talk to each other. None of them.
Everything is siloed. Yeah. Yeah.
Even
It's
our
horrendous.
military branches don't talk to each other.
Let's not get into government spending.
I won't.
Yeah.
But I will say our government, war time, when there's a war, none of the branches speak to each other on a digital platform. It's
That makes
command and
no
control. That's
wow.
reality. That's the reality.
But
So
in
data
today's
silos.
world, like that is
Yes, I
insane to
know.
me.
We've been asked to help look at that. Yeah, and I'm like, I
Wow.
don't want anything to do with classified data. No, thank you.
Is that just from the standpoint of liability, or like what's the resistance for you? It sounds like you love to
No,
dive headfirst into anything that's a challenge.
we
So,
do, but unclassified data is where we play.
yeah,
I don't want to be associated with any defense or nothing like
yeah,
that. That's not.
yeah.
There's other people that play in that space. Let them play.
No, that's interesting. Okay, fantastic. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's a very
Hmm.
simple and straightforward answer and something that I had not
Hmm.
at all considered. On one hand, it seems exciting to me, the idea of being able to converge and pool all the data. On the other hand, it also seems somewhat terrifying. Like there's almost a little bit of
Hmm.
safety in the fact that the
Yeah.
data is siloed. It's probably more of an illusion in my own mind than anything, but nonetheless, it makes me feel a little bit better. One thing that you talked about was utilizing the tools and resources for helping to improve the tax collection from
Hmm.
the homeowners there. And you mentioned that with a 30% mortgage rate, most people that are not qualified home buyers, i.e., they can't pay for the home in cash, are not going to be purchasing. So what I have to assume, and what sounds like is implied, is in that case, you're not. It's not like they're trying to again, bleed blood from a turnip, right? And not trying to tax the people that are already impoverished, but
Right.
really focus on those that do have the resources who should be paying their fair
Yes.
share,
Their
right?
taxes. Yeah. Yeah. So, they don't have social security numbers, most countries. They have some have national IDs, but not every what we found is they may have just put in national IDs, but none of the ministries use that national ID. So they'll have their unique ID number. So it's easy to hide and not pay taxes. So when we looked at Uganda, 2% were paying taxes. And that is life changing, right? So the president and I have a little bet. He thinks it should be $500 million a year. of taxes. I think it should be 250 million, whatever. We're when we started, it was 15 million. We're up to 100 million of collections. And what that does, it expands the middle income and provides the government the revenue they need so they can pay off their debt so they can become sovereign nations, right? It's math to
Yeah.
live within their means. So that only to live within their means, they have to have tax compliant citizens, which we all are here in the States. It's
Mhm.
hard to hide.
Yeah. Yeah.
But over there, easy to hide.
Yeah.
And the landlords or property owners, they get angry with us. And it's like, we're not making up. This is your law. You don't like the law, change the law.
Yeah.
It's a law in your books. All we're trying to do is put in tax compliance,
Right.
period.
Huh.
Period. So
So,
that's just rental income tax.
wow,
$500 million for rental income tax for one country the size of California.
that is amazing to me. I mean,
Mhm.
so what's really interesting about this in my mind, what I can't detract from is if you are going in and you're providing that government, the head of states, with this level of I mean, I guess quantitative and qualitative resources to be able to help them get more back. What this tells me, and again, what is implied, is that based on the relationships that you've developed, you also have a tremendous, based on everything that you've said about ethics, you also have a tremendous amount of faith in the leaders of these nations to
Mhm.
actually utilize these resources for the greater good. Am I hearing that
Yeah.
correctly?
It is, yeah. And there's some countries we can't work in. And I have very direct conversations like we're talking now, back
Mhm.
to my Texas oil and gas days.
Yeah.
It's very much, do you want transparency in your government? And remember, we started this 10 years ago. Yes or no? Cool if you do, great. We're an American company. We don't take a bribe. We don't give a bribe. Don't even go there. If you want to play that game, we're out. And there's some countries we're out immediately. Like I'm not going to play the, China, here's a bag of, cash, look the other way. It's not our
Mhm.
game. If you want
Mhm.
us in here, we'll do the work. We'll find internal corruption, which there's a lot. Sometimes they don't want to tackle that. Okay, it's not for us. So we really work with leaders they want to leave a legacy behind or they're new and they want to really make a difference for their country. Those are the guys we want to work with. The
What's
other
cool about that
ones,
is you're
yeah,
spearheading that legacy too.
that's my legacy I can leave behind, right? Is
Yeah,
how I
exactly.
help.
Yeah.
And that's, I really think about that all the time is what is the legacy I want to leave behind? And it's about connecting the unconnected, whether it's populations or data to connection,
Hmm.
to leave something better behind.
Hmm. That is beautiful and very well said. I love that. I mean, what is it's heartwarming, it's encouraging, it's inspiring on so many levels because I think the amount of corruption that we're all exposed to is um, it feels like a tremendous weight to carry. And where do you start? And to
Hmm.
know that one person is leading their company who has a global influence and making decisions not based on the amount of revenue that they're going to be bringing in, not that you can't and aren't doing very well, but making decisions based on the ethics of the individuals that they are working with and choosing to decide and cut off the differences between the ones that aren't willing to go in and tackle the greater problem and focusing on the ones that are going to reallocate those resources and continue to work on development and creating a happier, healthier world is really, really exciting to me on a lot of levels because
Yeah.
I want to meet more people like Jay. Like, I mean, truthfully though, because it's just
Yeah.
something that we don't it's just so easy to turn a blind eye to. I mean, and same thing with climate change. So let's talk about that. Like you talked
Yeah.
about
Let's talk about it.
really the core philosophy is you're taking big data, you use AI to analyze it, you then visualize, create a visual analysis, which I think is beautiful. It's one
Hmm.
thing to have it, it's one other thing to see it, the story that's telling
Hmm.
us, and then you use that to solve whatever the present problem is. So one thing you talked about is the climate challenge is we have 27 trillion in unmined resources in Africa. However, they're sitting on top of a forest, which are now being leveled, which
Yeah.
to me just
Hmm.
makes me feel sick to my stomach. So talk about talk about, let's just start with the carbon credits. Like,
Sure.
give people an idea of what those are. As I understand it, one thing that you had mentioned, not during this conversation, or I believe I read it, was, you gave the TEDx speech and you realized that a lot of people don't even know what carbon credits are. And I thought that was really interesting. Again, and I don't want to call it ignorance. It's just there's so much stuff in the world that it's hard to keep up with everything. So if you could give a basic, fundamental understanding to the audience and then dive into what you saw and found.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So carbon credits are, I'm sure you've heard of companies trying to be net zero by
Hmm.
2030, or your friends trying to reduce their emissions by
Hmm.
eliminating fossil fuels like
Hmm.
plastic bags or gas-powered cars. So about 30 years ago, they created this thing called carbon credits or carbon offsets. It's no,
Hmm.
both names.
Hmm.
And it's similar to a stock, but what it does, it allows companies or individuals to offset their pollution emissions when they've done everything they could do. They've done everything they can do. There's nothing more left for them to do. So, hold on, I just have one call. Sorry.
No problem.
I'll start that over. So anyway, so they have nothing more to do. So you can offset your emissions, and it's usually projects in underserved communities that either one absorb carbon, such as planting a tree or protecting a forest, or two, reducing emissions, like using renewable energy, such as hydro or solar power. So for every 1 ton of carbon that is offset in the atmosphere, there's a carbon credit that is created. And it's very similar to a stock. And then this carbon credit is traded on all these different marketplaces. And so remember, 1 ton of carbon equals 1 carbon credit. So this is a $2 trillion industry. I call it a climate economy where environmental sustainability intersects with economic growth. When I looked at Africa, we had been looking at this, and Africa only participates in about 13% of the projects. And how a project gets started, there's a project developer, and they say, you know what, we're going to protect this forest, or we're going to start up a solar farm. And you go through a lot of regulations and process and consultants. I mean, you can't imagine. There's over 100,000 stakeholders in a carbon project. It's crazy. Talk about data silos. So the project developer starts the project. They have to do what's called a project development design, a PDD. They put that together. It's like a business plan. Then that goes to a standards governing board, which are usually NGOs, which that don't get. I'll dive into that in a minute. And these standards governing boards are the authorities to sit there and judge your business plan and say whether yes or no they approve it. And if they approve it, then they allow you to go execute it and then come back and report results. And then they'll send out third-party auditors to say, did you protect this 1 million hectares of forest? Yes or no? Did the people benefit? Yes or no? So in your plan, you say, look, I'm going to save this forest, say it's 1 million acres, and I'm going to generate 30 million uh, tons of carbon credits. I'm going to offset. And of the money I generate, I'm going to give 30% to the community for them doing what we ask them to do. So it's all put in a plan. So I know how many carbon credits are going to be issued, kind of know the price based upon the market. And so I know that the community is probably going to get some money. They should. So you have these after the project is then approved, carbon credits issued, then it goes out in marketplaces. And there's a lot of brokerage marketplaces, or you can go direct to a company. You can go right to a Shell or BP and say, hey, do you want to buy my carbon credits? There are over-the-counter transactions, and they usually do 1-year contracts. So that's the ecosystem. You do a project, you get an asset, and you sell it. There's about 8,000 projects that go on a year in the voluntary carbon credit market. There's also a compliance carbon credit market, but I don't want to dive in that. It's very complicated, but same philosophy. We do a project, it meets these standards. I get a credit, I can sell them, I can make money. Well, last year in 2023, I read this, or one of my friends sent an article to me, and it said, hey, 90% of all the forest related carbon credits were worthless. And I'm like, what? I thought these carbon credits were real. And so I start diving in, and one of the projects they talked about was in Zimbabwe, and it was 1 million hectares. So hectares are about 2.2 million acres.
Hmm.
And it said, hey, bad for the climate, but a climate company out of Switzerland made $100 million off of it, and the communities got $30 million. I said, I don't buy it. So I said, well, good for the communities, bad for the companies that bought those worthless carbon credits, and bad for the climate. So I said, it just didn't sit right with me. So I called some friends in Zimbabwe. I hadn't ever been there. Actually, I had met the president before. Anyway, I called my friends and said, hey, can you get me to this community? And it was a journey. And they said, yeah. So I flew out there, and 2,600 kilometers later, we got there. I met with the chief. I gave him the article, and I said, sir, this project's been going on 12 years in your community. What have you gotten? He's like, what are you talking about? I go, well, these carbon credits, you're supposed to get $30 million. Now, he goes, are you kidding me? Like, this, if I had $30 million US dollars? And I said, yes, sir. He goes, this place would look like New York City. He goes, we don't have food. We don't have water. We don't have internet. We don't have employment. We don't have education. Like, are you kidding me? This place would be turned around. He goes, where did this money go? I go, well, what did you get? He goes, I got a bag of seed and a bag of soil. And once in a while, they come around and do a little seminar. I'm really sorry. I said, you know what? I'll speak up. And that led to the TEDx. And then I went to the government because I thought, well, maybe the government took the money. I was shocked that these grown men were shocked. I told them, I said, this foreign company made $100 million off your carbon credits and off this forest. And their first reaction was, air is worth this much money? I said, yeah. They're like, we don't, they were angry. They were mad. And then out came policies, regulations, et cetera. And I said, hey, I'll help educate you guys on this climate economy. It's economy to me. You can protect your forest and make money and get out of debt. Wow, what a concept. So then I went to the project developers, the standards board, and the climate investors, and each one of them were like, we did the right thing. They all pointed the finger at each other. Who knows? The project ended up blowing up. Nobody got busted. Two CEOs, one from the standards governing board and one from the climate investor, got removed, but then placed on a climate board. So there's a bunch of fraud going on. No one has ever, the chiefs have still not got their money, and neither did the country. So I'm like, wait a minute, this is all crap. And the more and
Yeah.
more people I'm talking to, environmentalists, and they're like, yeah, it is. I'm like, what? Like, why are we playing this game? And that was right or wrong, right? So I said, fine. I did the TEDx talk, and TEDx, doesn't let you dive into person, place, or thing. You have to be pretty general. And I was shocked at how many people were like, we had no idea. I'm like, what are you talking about? Have you ever seen on the airlines when they ask you to reduce your emissions? And you say, yeah, I'll do the $10 to reduce my emissions. Those are carbon credits. And there's one company that does that out of Norway called Choose, Choose. They consolidate, they buy these cheap carbon credits, usually they're forest related carbon credits, and resell them to the airlines. And then the airlines buy them and offset and say, feel good about themselves. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding. Like, the more we dove in, the more it was just crazy. So I said, okay, we got to fix this. How can we
Yeah.
fix this? How can I help Africa? First, we educated a lot of angry people that were playing the game, but whatever, I don't care. So then I go to the president. So I said, look, I'll go to we can do an analysis of your country. You're sitting on like $2 billion worth of natural resources that you could monetize, protect the environment, give your people the money. Are you in? So that's where we are right now. Um, so one weekend, I was just right after the TED Talk, I was just shocked that people were shocked. So I said, screw it, I'm going to write a book. So I just wrote about that journey. And it comes out, and I wanted it to come out in London first, because that is where most of the climate investors are. And then I want it to go to EU, because that's who's driving this. And then it'll eventually come to US. It'll be here in October. So I got a London publisher, and they were like, we have no idea. We had no idea. So it's kind of a adventure, journey, business. This is where we've gone wrong, and then there was more and more and more scams. I mean, you can't
Yeah.
imagine if you look up carbon credit scams on the internet, unbelievable. And I talked to the reporters who reported them, and we've shared notes. And anytime I hear about another one, I call them. So I said, how do we help? How do we change this? And
Hmm.
so I said, where are there real good carbon credit projects? And I talked to this climatologist who is now passed, but he told me, Jay, it's super easy. If you plant something, you let it grow, and then you bury it. That's the easiest form of carbon credits. So I went and found biochar. I don't know if you heard of biochar before.
Hmm.
Right. It's charcoal's eco-friendly cousin, but it's basically a bunch of tree or crop waste condensed down into this charcoal in, if you will, a trailer, like a 20 foot container. And if you mix that biochar with manure, and then it goes back into the ground, and it lasts literally for centuries. And it enriches the
Wow.
soil. You don't need much water. It's a fertilizer.
Hmm.
So I looked at Africa and I said, you know what? Again, 60% of the population are farmers. What do they have? They have crop waste, a lot of it. And so then we looked at which country has the most concentrated, and we ended up in Malawi because they have the most, they grow 62% of their land is maize. Like you fly in at the airport, there's maize everywhere, corn. And I said, can we take maize crop waste and create biochar and give a sustainable economy to the local communities and let them run a fertilizer business? So we said yes. So we're now trying to fund this. And you would think that would be easy to fund, but no, no one wants to fund um, a good project that actually does what it's supposed to do and provide sustainable incomes for communities. So
That's amazing.
we started like a we funder, a crowdsourcing and we'll kick that off here in the next couple of weeks.
That's
But
exciting. That actually leads into my
yeah,
next question because I mean,
yeah,
as we wrap up today's episode, one thing I got to highlight, I mean, is your willingness to tackle major global problems is
that's fun.
yeah, I mean, well, I love that you say that it's fun too, but I mean, like it's just it's incredible to me. Again, it's really inspiring because you not only identify issues, most people stop at identification. You go, what can we do about this? We have the tools, we have the resources, we have the teams to come in and make a really big difference. So I mean, I love your desire and enthusiasm and passion and willingness to step in and say, hey, this is not right. What can we do to
Mhm.
make this better? As individuals, as groups, as countries, as leaders in every single context. Now, one thing I'd be curious is, is there a way for the average person to get involved in supporting this mission?
Yeah, so we're like I said, we're going to kick off this crowdfunding on WeFunder.
Hmm.
And we set up a company called Callium Resources, and that's Caelum Resources, all one word. Calum means heavens in Latin. And we set up that company because we wanted to say, can we make a difference? Because these projects are supposed to create sustainable economies, and up level the people. And so we're going to do biochar first. We're going to do a pilot in Malawi. It's on, like I said, we found the land. We're going to put the pyrolysis machine, which is like a 20-foot container, and we're going to put it on an ag school. There's an agriculture school, and allow the students and train them on how to use it and give that as an economy back to the local communities. Because,
Hmm.
and I asked the local communities, and they live pretty, simple. Like I said, most of them live on less than $1 a day.
Hmm.
And I asked them, I go, do you like living this way? Because to us, we'd be like, oh man, they live in a mud hut or whatever. And they go,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a simple life. We just want, sustainable food and employment. That would be great. We don't want to live in a high rise. We don't want this overdeveloped. We like our simple land. We like our simple life. We just need the basics, like education, clean water. This is what the chief, clean water, food, give us, employment, and we want to educate our youth.
Mm.
So that
Wow.
is that's our pilot we're going to do. Once we prove it out, we're taking that everywhere.
Mm.
And we are going to give it to the nations of these countries because they all have agriculture, a lot
Mm.
of waste. And then even like tree slash. So in Oregon, It's called Oregon Biochar. They were kind enough to let me come in and observe it. It's a giant facility, and it's all the extra tree waste from the forest management.
Mhm.
It generates power while it's doing this process, and that power is stored and sold to us here in California.
Wow. That's
I
amazing.
didn't, we didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. No
And they
kidding.
sell it so cheap, and we are paying so much, so we're angry about that. Anyway, but Africa, not to divert, Africa, they don't have power either, so
Mhm.
we can create power,
Mhm.
and we can
Yeah.
store that power and send it out. So anyway, Callium Resources, it's on WeFunder. It's set up now. We haven't launched it yet, but it's ready to go.
That's exciting. I mean, I love to see you, spearheading and tackling these problems head on. And I'm really
Mm,
excited to hear about how this pilot launch goes and, be a part of witnessing this journey for you. So,
great.
first and foremost, I got to thank all of our listeners for spending their time with us today on the Perpetual Growth Podcast. And a big shout out to Jaye Connolly for bringing so much value to today's conversation. Jaye, where can our listeners learn more about what you are currently working on? I mean, you mentioned the book's going to be coming to the US soon. You've given your
Yep.
TED Talks. Where can they find more about you?
Yeah, so I have a simple website, jayconnolly.com. So JayeConnolly.com. So all that's in there. RippleNami, you can look at that website. But if you go to my site, everything is explained.
Excellent. Perfect. Yeah. And we'll make sure that
Great.
we have all those links in the show notes so you guys
Okay.
don't have to search for anything. If this episode sparks something for you, don't keep it to yourself. Be sure to share it, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review to help us reach even more people on their growth journey. And remember, growth doesn't happen by chance, it happens by choice. We'll see you all next time.